the most important thing is it makes business sense here, right? And that's very clear by the fact that without any policy, India has 1.5 million electric e-rickshaws, right? It didn't need anything, right? So that's a clear example that when it makes business sense and people are making money, things happen.
So welcome to the Blue Circle. Thank you all for joining in today. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience they bring in. And thank you to our sponsors, Omega Seiki Mobility, which is part of the larger Anglian Omega Group. They've recently invested 200 crores in their EV business, and they have launched their smart electric vehicles with state-of-the-art in-house R&D. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us. We've received over 500 registrations, most of whom are CEOs and CXOs. Many of them are repeat visitors to our webinar, which is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue on the online modes as well. For those of you who are new with us today, the Blue Circle is an ecosystem to help business leaders manage disruptive times and become future ready. We focus on the 4 fundamental sectors, which are real estate, infra, healthcare, energy, and e-mobility. We also present socio-economic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. In response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series, our digital publication, which is active across these 4 sectors. We're also building a handpicked domain-focused expert pool drawn from among our leadership community or from our member base and its associates that will guide businesses across these 4 sectors during and post-COVID. In addition to this, and you will be very happy to know that we are launching an exclusive digital platform, which will be the LinkedIn for leaders, wherein we will present them with the opportunity of connecting with people just like them, also house highly quality curated content and meaningful conversations. Those leaders among you who are interested, please do write to us. And for today's session, the topic is Commercial EVs Sparking India's Mobility Vision. The discussion will revolve around what are the challenges and opportunities emerging in the commercial EV sector, and how should the government and the stakeholders respond to them for its enduring growth. We've invited prominent practitioners and thought leaders from the cohorts, which largely make up for the commercial EV sector. Now, in the best interest of time, I will just quickly mention their respective names and designations. We have with us Mr. Anmol Singh Jaggi, co-founder BluSmart, Mr. Chetan Maini, co-founder and vice chairman, Sun Mobility, Dr. Dev Mukherji, managing director, Omega Seiki Mobility, Mr. Nishant Arya, executive director, JBM Group, Mr. Saurav Kumar, founder and CEO, Euler Motors, and Mr. Anil Srivastava, who had joined us for our pre-event discussion, has now an urgent meeting with the minister to attend, so he'll be joining in shortly. And the moderator for the session is Mr. Pavan Choudary, best-selling author, CEO, public intellectual, and sits on several boards across the country. So thank you very much, sirs. Welcome, and welcome to the audience. Kindly note that we will have Q&A towards the end of the session. Some of you already shared some excellent questions, and they are now with the moderator. So now I request Mr. Choudary to please begin the session, sir.
Thank you, Siddharth, and a big pleasure to be with you all. And thank you very much, as Siddharth says, and I saw also scores of you are repeat visitors and really appreciate your presence with us. Big topic. So let us start with understanding the context. And I think I will ask Nishant to tell us what is the ecosystem of the electric vehicle, which we are going to speak about, because he operates in the entire ecosystem. So Nishant, if you will just lay out the terrain, then I will get into the meat of the topic.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a good platform which Blue Circle has created, and definitely all of us have experiences we'd like to share with the whole audience. Because EV industry is all about collaboration and working together. In the EV ecosystem, what we have experienced is that how we could look at generation to consumption. So starting from renewable energy, going to right battery technology, the key aggregates, electric vehicles, complete power and transmission systems, charging technologies, operation and maintenance, and intelligent transportation systems, which are enabled with IoT, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. I think that's very important to work and see that how one can provide the whole ecosystem to any end consumer, which really redefines the way any consumer operates. And here what we see is that battery, after its first life in the electric vehicles, do go for the second life in energy storage. And we are not having any toxic waste for a period of at least 20 years from when the battery comes to the market. And it has a second life and third life very well defined. Simultaneously, what is also well understood, like the wave India saw in solar in last 10 years, prices came down substantially, and now solar has its own parity, and the complete density of solar is increasing substantially. But there we missed out on localization, manufacturing, and other things in a big way. And definitely in the EV ecosystem, the idea is how we as a country, as our Honorable Prime Minister's vision is, become Atmanirbhar, and everything is indigenized. And that is why you see all Indian faces here, different Indian entrepreneurs who are working in this segment. So I think that's very important. We need to learn from the world, but we need to do what is required. India has its own solutions, and we give an integrated approach with such kind of EV ecosystem, which can lay the right foundation. And otherwise, when we talk about a well-to-wheel perspective in the EV ecosystem, so starting from the oil well to the vehicle wheel. So in this case, we talk from the renewable energy to the electric vehicle and the whole EV ecosystem. So that is how we map it.
Yeah. So you have said that from the renewable energy piece to the charging piece to the vehicle segment piece to within that the battery management piece to the recycling piece. This is the entire ecosystem, and there are other players also which enter into this sector because the ownership models are changing, the technology is changing, the service, etc. also those platforms will change or alter, and the entire pecking order of the automobile industry may be redrawn in the electric industry, electric vehicle industry. Great points, very good, very well summarized, Nishant. And I would like to come to discuss. First, let me go to Anmol to ask Anmol that will commercial EVs spearhead the electric EV revolution? Will commercial EVs spearhead the EV revolution? And if yes, why do you think so, Anmol? And thereafter, I'm coming to Chetan.
Cool. So first of all, thanks to Blue Circle for putting this together. At BluSmart, we definitely believe that it's the commercial EV vehicles which will make initial success in the EV sector, and there are two prime reasons for it. The first one being that that the government, how the subsidy from the government is structured is that there is hardly any subsidies when it comes to private. For commercial vehicles, we have FAME. For commercial vehicles, especially in the state of Delhi, we have the Delhi Pollution Control Board subsidy. So there are a lot of subsidies which are there for commercial usage, and hence that's the reason why we are seeing that it is going to be the commercial sector which is going to come out first. The second thing is that you will also see that that a lot of these commercial vehicles run about 200 to 250 kilometers a day. Now, the whole process of getting into electric vehicles, the whole business concept is that the vehicles are a bit more expensive, but moment you keep running them, the operating cost of these vehicles is very low. So as low as 1 rupee a kilometer, at least for a 4-wheel mid-size sedan. So at 1 rupee a kilometer and you run it 200 kilometers vis-a-vis diesel, which is at 5 rupees a kilometer, you save a lot of money while running more. And commercial vehicles, will definitely run more than the personal vehicles. Personal vehicles, somebody could do 30 kilometers a day, 40 kilometers a day. But when you are in a fleet, you are doing 200, 250 kilometers in a day. And that just helps the recovery of the initial capex that you're spending extra to get an electric vehicle come out, the money comes back sooner. So in my opinion, it's a no-brainer that commercial vehicle will succeed personal mobility in electric mobility. And I think the government schemes are also structured around that.
Great. So I fully agree with what you've said. I would like to ask Chetan now, who has been a pioneer in the segment, who is also the knowledge from other countries, how their experience has been. Do you feel, Chetan, that there is anything else you would like to add to what Anmol said are the reasons why he thinks that commercial vehicles will spearhead the electric revolution? And what has been the experience in other countries? Chetan.
I think that the experience in other countries is very different from how we look at India. The rest of the world is focusing on cars. And while 85% of the vehicles in India are two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and buses. And so I think that constitutes a large portion of where fuel is being used and energy is being used. And so the drivers for India are much, much bigger. Also globally, if you look at it, most of the cars are used for personal mobility. And we're thinking here shared and fleet usage. So I think the drivers are very different. And so the factors are a little bit skewed. The only difference that would be in China. I see there a lot of commercial vehicles related to taxis, deliveries, and others are more electric. But there's still, the personal side is very large in those markets. So considering then from a commercial side, I think commercial has to have a slightly broader aspect on this front. Anmol's perspective on transportation related to corporate transportation would form a subset of that. So there's goods and passenger for commercial on this area. And then there are different form factors on this front, right? So I think that delivery, first mile and last mile can completely go electric on this area because it makes complete business sense given the number of kilometers you've driven. Cities going to go electric on this area, and the new BS6 regulations that makes IC engine vehicles even more expensive related to what electrics could be on this front, right? Delivery, also the e-commerce industry going up to two-wheelers and stuff would see a large perspective on the commercial side, right? The most important thing is it makes business sense here, right? And that's very clear by the fact that without any policy, India has 1.5 million electric e-rickshaws, right? It didn't need anything, right? So that's a clear example that when it makes business sense and people are making money, things happen, right? So we're going to see that in more of these form factors. The other part I do see is in buses. I think that when you start to cross 150 to 200 kilometers a day, buses, both from city buses as well as corporate transportation, would play a large role, right? So it's all coming down to the fact of usage and utilization and how many kilometers you do, right? Electric vehicles will last you longer. They'll have lower maintenance. And of course, they're going to have lower cost of energy. And this only comes true if you use it a lot. And at personal mobility at 30, 40 kilometers a day, you won't break even. Using 150 kilometers plus a day, you break even faster and it makes business sense.
Absolutely. And 1.5 million e-rickshaws, you said?
Yes.
Which just came into, the entire piece came into motion because of the commercial advantage of commercial EVs. And also 2 million e-scooters, which they are saying are likely to be the couriers, intra-city couriers. Yeah. So, great. Coming to the three-wheeler piece and starting that with Deb. So Deb, what is it that you would like to add to the various points which Anmol and Chetan have made in favor of commercial EVs being the spark plug for the entire electric mobility piece? Deb.
Yeah, thank you, Pavan. I fully agree with what Chetan and Anmol just talked. See, on the commercial side, it is the economic consideration that matters the most to the user, because this is a business enabler. And in the context of India, the cost becomes the biggest, or rather one of the foremost consideration for going for a vehicle. So in this case, three-wheeler and then two-wheeler we do see as a main driver as the industry evolves. And later on, personal vehicles, cars and pickup trucks will come in. In the context of the e-commerce industry, which is a big driver of the industrial landscape, particularly post-COVID, we see that is one industry which has really sprung back, and we see a lot of movement. So in this case, we see the first mile, the middle mile, last mile. This is very much conducive to usage of EVs, especially the last mile. That is where the role of our three-wheeler comes in. The need is, I feel, the vehicle has to be robust. It has to be backed by a reliable technology, good quality, reliable vehicle, because this vehicle has to run for maybe 18 hours, 20 hours, at peak season. So that is where the value comes in, and if we are able to deliver that to the customers, definitely it increases his revenue, and obviously brings in economic benefits. So this is where I see the role being played by three-wheeler EV in the commercial side is a big role to play. And also now, as we see, the government policies have been very consistent. And even yesterday, government has announced the vehicle can be sold without the battery. And I'm sure Chetan will be very happy for his, swappable battery technology, because they are the pioneers. So this is where I see a big boost coming for the commercial usage of three-wheelers as well as two-wheelers. That's my view. And technology is mature, today, or fast maturing. So as the technology matures, the government support kicks in. So economic benefits will drive, and all these three lead to the scale. As we know, auto industry needs a particular scale for the investments and all to accrue in. So I think on the commercial side, three-wheelers and two-wheelers will have a big role to play.
Great point. And you, even though this question was came to you where the first few balls were also bowled very, very well and comprehensively, you added the e-commerce piece and how e-commerce is pushing this forward, as well as as well as you say that the government is, as the industry is maturing, we also hope that the government's policies will be even more thorough and even more consistent, so that there are no flip-flops as we go forward. Saurav, you're the last person to bat on this question, whether commercial vehicles will spark the EV revolution in India. Any additional points? And just to make sure that you do not have the disadvantage of coming out last next time, I will maybe begin with you, or for the next round. Go ahead, Saurav.
No, happy to be here, right? I think the points that were made, I agree with most of these points. In fact, like Euler is focused on the light commercial vehicle segment, and in the next 5 years, you will actually see three-wheeler cargos or the four-wheeler cargos from Euler running, and so that's kind of the focus area. And we definitely believe in the whole approach of why commercial vehicle will work. I mean, be the TCO, the range, or even from an OEM perspective, the certainty around what the customers are going to expect from the vehicle. They're not going to take the vehicle and suddenly if they're running in last mile, they will start deciding from tomorrow I want to run it in first mile or between cities, right? So those things, so there are some certainties around that. So you can build your ecosystem, you can build for a battery range, all of that. So yeah, I would sort of agree with the point that India will see majority of its EV initial uptake coming from the commercial vehicle segment, be it in passenger, be it in cargo, and where Euler is focused mostly on the cargo part. And for us, just to add, right, e-commerce, yes, I agree. I think the point Mr. Dev made. So lot of like our customers are already using our three-wheeler cargo, and they all are e-commerce companies from Flipkart or Deliveries or Ecom Express or to.
Okay, great. So if we were to discuss further, there can be 4 nodes of discussion. One is technology, the second is financing, the third is infrastructure, and fourth is policy. There is a question coming up, a poll question. By the way, I've got a lot of questions before this presentation started on my WhatsApp also. Plus, there are more coming in. I'm trying to include all the questions which can be generically included. So, if technology, financing, infrastructure, and policy are the 4 nodes on which we can carry on this discussion, can we right now look at financing and infrastructure? So from the financing point of view, I would like to know, starting with you, Saurav, that what are the challenges and the hurdles which you face in getting the finance around the vehicle arranged, and any other financial challenges which you face in the commercial EV space, and then I will come to the others.
Sure. So I think when we look at financing, I think, and my approach is, of course, like the segment is going to be the cargo, and this is the three-wheeler and the four-wheeler cargo segment, right? There, the end customer are these, small fleet owners who are, let's just say, driving the vehicle themselves. So they are driver entrepreneur, or a small fleet owner who has 1 or 2 vehicle. I mean, that's largely, and then you have obviously like big aggregators who would have like 50 to hundreds of these vehicles, right? So there we have faced financial sort of like, the financing is one of the big hurdle, as in the most of the financial institution are yet to sort of recognize the EV technology from, is this something that is this vehicle will have 7 to 10 years of life cycle? Let's just say if the guy who is getting the vehicle financed, if for any reason the vehicle does not work for after a year, or if he if he defaults on the loan and they have to repurchase the vehicle, so the question in their mind about the secondary value, or if the vehicle is in there, let's just say somewhere frozen asset for 1 to 2 months, what happens to battery life? All of those questions, at least in the last 2 years while we were talking to different and these are large financiers who have financed three-wheelers in previous IC engine vehicles. So they had these questions in their mind, and they're also very new to the new technological term. Is LFP battery better, or NCM battery better? Is water degradation? So these are the things they don't understand. They look at everything ki, okay, isme loha kitna hai, or and what will be the scrap value, and when they think from that, your cost of financing, some of that goes very, very high. So yes, financing has been a challenge. I think the Delhi EV policy, if you look, it tried to address one of that point where they're trying to bring in Delhi Finance Corporation to reduce that percentage a bit. So I think that would be a huge help.
Great point. So Dev, do you also encounter this problem, particularly from the retail buyer? High interest rates up to 40% by being charged by unorganized financiers, or buyer inclination also going towards cheaper product, even if it compromises safety and compliance norms. Dev.
Yes, I agree, Pavan. This is a challenge. It's a dual problem. One, as you said.
Sorry, we lost you. Dev, we have lost you. Deb?
Or
Okay.
Saurav
So,
also mentioned that, private mind imagine the mind is a low-end vehicle which China import and all that, so which has a limited life. And as you know, most of these vehicles in the commercial sector, about 70 to 80% of the vehicles get financed. So that is a big sort of question mark, that or a challenge that we vehicle makers, we will have to encounter when we sell the vehicles. So as I think the answer also lies in the question itself, that we have to deliver a robust quality vehicle. We have to deliver an OEM quality. For example, Bajaj makes a three-wheeler, or Piaggio, or the others who are something like that, a robust quality which has a guaranteed life of 5 years, 7 years, something like that, where the question of breaking down of the vehicle or the unreliability of the vehicle does not arise. So I think that is the way we can ensure as OEMs, as vehicle makers, these doubts or concerns will go away. But at the moment, yes, it is a new technology. Technology is evolving. Market is also evolving. And as we know, in India case, the EV or the transition started with the low-end three-wheelers, which typically don't have a long life, and there are quality and safety issues. So obviously the financiers and banks and all are a little averse to this. But as time goes by and we deliver a robust quality, these will be taken care of.
Very well made. In fact, it was a pity that the low-end three-wheelers kick-started this market. They kick-started it, but also the shadow of poor performance fell even on good players who were to come, like you or Saurav in the market. Let me take this to Chetan. Chetan, is there a way where before this experience of use of 5 to 7 years, robust machines gets translated into sale and through buyer confidence in the coming years? Is there a way through technology, etc., how we can reduce the financial bottleneck which Deb and Saurav have spoken about?
Yeah, so I think the financial bottleneck, there are a couple of key areas. One, as they rightly talked about, is you don't know the residual value. And the residual value is a large portion of it is to understand the batteries. And so if batteries constitute 40% of the price of the vehicle, and the batteries degrade faster than the rest of the vehicle, how do you start to compute that, right? So for a financier, this becomes very important, right? Also, for someone who has such a high risk on something he doesn't know, concerns them. So therefore, if you remove that from the equation, you get rid of one of the issues. And so the idea of battery swapping, where you buy the vehicle and use batteries as a service, allows you to understand the vehicle, what the financer already understands, right? And he knows that as Saurav and others said, that this is Loha and everything, they know what it means. But also the electric powertrain, people understand, lasts much longer, right? It's fewer moving parts. And so they know in general that the depreciation of this vehicle should be equivalent, if not better. So that would separate this one important part out, which is the battery side of it, right? The second part on this area is that very often, because vehicles included batteries and you're financing it for say 4 or 5 years, the warranty sometimes on these products are 2 or 3 years. And so if right after warranty, the battery fails, what happens is the cost of replacement is so high that the guy is probably just going to leave his vehicle and he defaults. So again, it comes back to the fact that it is very different. And an example of this is with Tesla's 8-year battery life or whatever they talk about. It's easy to finance a vehicle. So it's important that the life of those components match up, right? The third aspect, I think, with technology today, like in our case, we have batteries that have GPS and GSM on there. So we actually know real time every day how much is driven and what the driver is doing. Now, if you know that the driver is doing X number of kilometers a month, he can pay. So in a way, you can say that next month he's not doing this. You can actually be predictive to say he's probably going to default the end of this month, versus typically they know 3 months later after following up. So when you have a set of predictive analytics that you can create for financing companies, they may find this much easier to say, yes, they know how they can pay. So you're trying to figure out a real-time microcredit value on this front. So I believe these could be some ways that technologies could probably help financing as we take this step forward.
The last one is very interesting. You're bringing in IoT into the space to measure how credible is the buyer, or how what kind of revenue streams he must be having to be able to justify credit to him at more reasonable terms. Very good point. Anmol, have you faced any difficulties in financing of commercial vehicles, or you are immune to those? Because of course you are also using technology. I saw your advertisement the other day where you are saying that in a BluSmart car you are safer because the driver opens your door and closes it for you, and we are monitoring that, and that is really very, very comforting. Because if I was to sit in a cab today, I will sit like this so that I don't contact anything, and my mind would be worried about the handle, the knob of the handle which others have touched. Anmol.
Yep. No, thank you for that. I think a lot of training and procedures that are there to make your ride safer. But I would want to say, sir, that the entire issue on financing, I would want to say, is two front. One is equity financing, debt financing. From an equity perspective, I think there is a lot of risk capital which is there for electric mobility. I think all of us at least have raised some form of funding on the equity side from third-party investors, which helps us. And there is, I can tell you by the complete interest in the sector that electric mobility is garnering, the equity interest is very high, and I think it's once in a century opportunity which is there with us and our investors, that the whole industry is going to get overturned in its conventional form, and that's where we see there are a lot of risk takers as entrepreneurs, and a lot of risk takers as investors who are very interested on the equity side. When it comes to financing of assets, of course, there is a small bit of equity only which goes in financing of assets, and majority of it is debt. The problem in getting debt is credibility of what we are trying to say. So whether it is credibility on your technology, and whether it is credibility on the balance sheet. Now, with each passing day, more and more electric mobility, more and more electric cars, three-wheelers, two-wheelers coming on the road, the credibility for this sector is rising. And there are more good stories than bad stories which are there to be said. And hence we see, so for example, the first set of cars that we got financed about 15 months back, we just had a 3-year repayment. Today, we are easily able to get a 6-year to 8-year repayment for our electric cars. Compared to ICE engine cars, which only get a 4-year, a commercial ICE engine car can only get a 4-year because the license to operate for a commercial ICE engine car on the road is just 4 years. So we are seeing that in just about 15 months, the 3-year has gone to up to 6 years of debt financing, which helps us a lot. And secondly, the interest rates in about 15 months back, and of course, interest rates have generally also come down by 200 basis points. But the fall for electric mobility has been sharper than what the fall has been for the normal market. I think there is a huge amount of people want to lend to electric mobility. As an ecosystem, we have to work towards increasing the credibility of the electric mobility sector. And the last thing that I would want to add is that there is a very, very huge amount of money which is there with impact. There is about $13 trillion of money which is globally floating, which is searching for businesses which create impact on environment, social governance, and that money is there for electric mobility. We are trying to tap a lot of that money. I'm sure all my co-panelists are trying to tap into that money, but impact is somewhere where we clearly believe, and $13 trillion is a lot of money which is there in the market, which wants to, and a portion of it coming to electric mobility goes without saying.
Sure. In fact, you're right. ESG is having a lot of capital chasing it. At the same time, the credibility of fleet operators is more let me say, more established or easier to establish than an individual buyer who would like to run his own vehicle. But your point is very well taken that this sector will not be starved for funds, and because funds will come, new ownership models will come, and things will move forward. We have Mr. Anil Srivastava also with us now, and before I go to him, I would like to close this question with Nishant. Nishant, would you like to add anything to the financing piece, the challenges which the commercial side faces? And meanwhile, I request Mr. Anil Srivastava to acclimatize himself to the discussion. We are going to come back to him to speak about the supply chain and the impact of changing geopolitics on it. Nishant.
Yeah, I think a lot of good points have already been shared. From our perspective, I think what is important is that at times different companies work in silos. What different financial institutions or the global green impact funds and pension funds who are looking to invest into green and electric mobility always try and see that how they are looking at the total cost of ownership and looking at things holistically. When they look at things holistically, they try and understand that what is the dependability on a battery, because battery is not an independent product. It is linked to the kind of charging cycle you use. Similarly, the kind of depth of discharge, the kind of drivability your vehicles have, and how predictable are they? Are they varying from a day-to-day basis? So that's why we saw in public transportation, even in FAME or otherwise, the largest share in our country goes to electric buses by far, because 90% of public transportation is carried out through buses. And still in India, we are having less than one bus per 1,000 people, which is significantly lower than different parts of the world. And definitely we try and see that in FAME also they have gone close to 40% for the bus funding, because you are impacting the masses. You're talking about affordability. You're talking about bringing affordability with the safe, and really a need is being converted to a choice. So how a person is using a vehicle, because it's not a need, it's a choice which they make, considering how safe and affordable it is. At the same time, what is essential is when you have a definitive cycle of 200, 250 kilometers in city, or for a coach which goes up to 500 kilometers a day, the asset utilization goes up substantially, and the level of variability is very low. And that's why investors have a much higher confidence, because every state government and central government subsidizes public transportation, and specifically buses, for a common man, not only in India, but every single part of the world. It is equally important as is electricity, water, or other basic needs which they try and provide to any other citizen of the country. There, what we have experienced is that many new models with respect to the operating conditions have been brought in, where they try and monitor. So in a recent study which one of the international banks was doing, we were working with them, that the operating cost which is saved, which is in electric buses, what we've seen is less than 25% of normal bus, and the fuel cost is also about 30% to 35% of a normal bus. There they see that definitely that helps them give them a clear understanding on the business model and on a TCO basis to be able to fund such kind of vehicles, where the initial capex goes up and the operating cost goes down. So looking at it from a capex and OPEX perspective, in TCO really gives them that kind of understanding. And another thing which helps is that when you're using new technologies like fast charging, so many companies do try and position larger batteries, because their focus is to have more number of batteries on the vehicle and look at night charging. But when you come at day charging, the vehicles become optimal, and you can charge the vehicle in half an hour to an hour. So that really changes the whole paradigm, and the battery size also goes down, and you are able to use better technologies where the battery life is much longer. I think that is the very important art and science behind it, which cannot be ignored in any case. And that is what has been driving the sector substantially.
No, well made. So what you have said is that there is route predictability, vehicle utilization, etc. This will ensure that the cost of the entire product TCO comes down, and the ease of charging, which you said, fast charging, yes, it really helps, but at the same time, fast charging hurts the battery life, and it has to be climatically controlled. Of course, technology is coming to do that. But overall, you've said that investment is not an issue here, and eventually the bus which is costing more than 2 times of an ICE bus will prove that its TCO is lower than that of a ICE bus. Great points. Now let us go to Mr. Anil Srivastava. Thank you very much, Srivastava Saab, for being with us. Really appreciate your presence, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to host you. The point which I'd like to ask you, Srivastava Saab.
Pavan, could you just fill in somebody, and if you allow me to join?
I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. Can you go off video and speak? Maybe I'm not.
Could you allow me to join after 10 minutes? Meanwhile, yeah. Some signal problem here. Could I join you after 10 minutes?
Sure. Please join us after 10 minutes. So then we will leave the supply chain piece for right now till he joins us, and let us come to the infrastructure piece, and let us begin with Chetan. So Chetan, in the charging infrastructure piece, what is it that will move the commercial vehicle ball forward? What are the challenges, and what are your ideas to overcome them? Chetan.
Thanks, Pavan. From my perspective on the commercial vehicle side, I think there are 3 key challenges that need to be addressed, right? It's the vehicle cost, it's people's concern about the range anxiety, and it's the uptime of vehicle, which is often governed by the long refueling time. And so these 3 need to be addressed on this front. And so it's not just about the charging infrastructure, it's a combination of the charging infrastructure and the business model, right? So by separating the batteries from the vehicles, you can get such commercial vehicles to be cost neutral to internal combustion engine vehicles, which allows the procurement to be very easy. And the cost of energy is cheaper, and the cost of maintenance, of course, cheaper. So the commercials make sense from day one and not over a period of time, right? The second part is that there is a variability in commercial vehicles, right? So some days they may do some amount, 50 kilometers, some day 100, and some days in a peak area like we recently saw, on a Flipkart sale or Amazon sale, they may go to 150 kilometers in a day, right? Now you cannot, in such peak areas, say, oh, we're going to wait for this, and we get range anxiety around what we can do. So you kind of want to make sure that you can meet those customer demands, and so the procurement of a vehicle is based on 1% of the requirement, not 99%. And so you have to address that range anxiety for 1%, but that defines why you purchase it. So here is where the infrastructure, if it mimics gasoline, makes much easier. And so our thoughts around the swapping area says you're swapping in 2 minutes compared to 4 minutes to refuel. It's done cheaper, and it's more convenient because it's digitally enabled. You're not changing the mindset of a consumer. You're giving him something slightly better than what he's used to. He doesn't have to wait 1 hour or 2 hours for charging on this area. And in certain light commercial vehicles, fast charging is even more challenging because you don't have air conditioning systems in smaller form factors. As you go to cars and stuff, you can have battery cooling, which allows you to fast charge. So I think that the infrastructure solution for commercial vehicles, 2 and 3 wheelers, and maybe even 4 wheelers for delivery would fall a lot around the battery swapping infrastructure on this area. And of course, for other applications, a combination of slow charge and fast charge would also work, and depending on the sectors on where we look at.
So if I was to combine both the points which you made regarding this round and the earlier rounds, what you're saying is buyer preference is going to be decided by affordability, the capex, performance, durability, comfort. And you're saying user preference will be decided by range anxiety, charge anxiety, if we can call it charge anxiety, how much time will I have to wait there, and overall upkeep. And the point which you're making is that if you want to get the guy rid of charge anxiety, you go for the swapping model right now rather than a fast charge model which hurts the battery life, or a slow charge model which troubles him and reduces his life through stress. Am I right, Chetan?
Very much. I think, we've done over 1 million kilometers of our swapping solution. And with lead acid batteries, these consumers were doing around 70 kilometers. With lithium ion vehicles with a 1 hour, hour and a half fast charge during the midday, they were doing around 100. And with swapping, they've been doing 140 plus kilometers, right? And so they're earning 40% more. Finally, that's what comes to it, right? If they can earn more and the asset utilization is higher. The entire commercial industry needs a higher asset utilization, right? And so if you need an extra swap, you want to run an extra shift and it takes 2 minutes extra, that's fine, right? That's absolutely acceptable, right? And you want that flexibility. So I think that this enables that flexibility. And you're separating charging from utilization, which is very important. Because imagine sometimes someone goes to fast charge, and at that point there was a problem with the station, or there wasn't power available or something, right? He is stuck. But when you separated the two, there could be charged batteries available. So even if there was no power, he can take a battery and move on, right? It's all about the comfort level of utilization. The first time a customer has that extra trip and he loses money because he didn't have a charged battery, it has a negative feeling, right? And so you need to just address this at a very fundamental level.
Great point. Coming to you, Dev, do you also feel that what Chetan is saying might be the short term or long term, in your view, way out? Is swapping the way out for you also? Have you tried it, and what is your experience there?
Yeah, I believe that swapping will be an option along with the fixed charging. I think this whole industry has to work on hybrid or multiple models. As the technology evolves, the range anxiety will, or rather it is becoming range comfort, and charging anxiety will also change towards giving that short charging time and giving additional comfort to the customer. That is where we are heading as the technology improves and more and more miles get added, the chemistry changes, the newer materials come into it. So I feel that swapping will remain a very important part of the whole ecosystem. I don't know what percentage would be fixed, what percentage would be charging, but definitely I feel that as technology evolves and the scale comes in, it's all about scale, but there's a bit of a chicken and egg here. Unless you get more stations, you don't get scale, and the reverse is also true. So I think this is where government or the government agencies, the public sectors and all will have to play a role here. As we know, setting up the infrastructure on ground takes a lot of time and a lot of investment in India. So I think the oil companies, for example, they can partner with, or other public sectors, as multiple charging stations come in, which could be monitored and over an app, and that is the way to go. I fully believe that charging will be a major option available to users in time to come.
And Saurav, would you like to add something to this? Have you found that the quality of charging stations which are available for three-wheelers is extremely diverse, and a swapping facility coming out from a reliable source might help you? And anything else you'd like to add on the charging piece? And then on the charging infrastructure, I'm coming to Anmol.
Okay, so let me, first say that I think India will have both charging and swapping in the short term. There are some segments where swapping would make more sense. There are some segments where I think fixed charging will make more sense, right? And in the next 5 years, I think those segments will automatically sort of figure out where the best fits are. Euler today is heading more toward a fixed charging approach, and our thought process are a bit simple, and it kind of lies around 3-4 things, which are your life, range, time, and cost. And when you talk about range, what we have seen is most people in three-wheeler, let's just say if you're talking about a cargo use case, they don't drive more than 80, 90 kilometers. You can give them 120, 130, but they won't, I mean, because there is a time when they get up, they take load, they deliver, they eat something, and it's already night, and they would sort of come back. If you look at like the typical sort of entrepreneur life, and yes, I mean, there would be extreme use cases where there would be like, much more kilometers. So, and hence I think maybe some other factor of your swapping and some of that makes sense over there. But for majority of the cases where, let's just say if you're driving 80, 90 kilometer, if our value proposition is going to be, I'm going to give you, let's just say 100 or 120 kilometer, let's just say, right? So that you don't have to worry, you drive the whole day, you don't have to figure out where the charging station is, swapping station is, you go drive, come back and, get done with the day, put it in charge and go on with your day, right? So that takes care of your charging anxiety. Takes care of your range anxiety, right? And we believe that with technology, your battery pack, cell capacity, or the volumetric, whatever we call like watt-hour per kg or whatever per liter, different ways to measure specific energy density, they're going to improve. So in the same amount of weight or same amount of volume, you're going to package more and more energy, and hence you will get more range over a period of time. So we believe that range is not going to be a problem. It will only increase with time. Coming to your charging time problem, which we call about the timing anxiety issue. There again, the same thing is that maybe today, like, we are charging and we believe that with fast charging, it degrades. Yes, if it degrades if you don't liquid cool the battery pack or if you don't maintain a good temperature. But if you look at, one of the best examples of car maker, which is Tesla, which are shown like, over a period of 5-7 years, that there are a lot of battery packs people have fast charge, and over a period of 8-9 years it has only reduced by like 10% or 15% degradation. India has like, temperature conditions are a bit different in your commercial vehicle usage, where our focus of conversation is you have more depth of discharge, so you'll have different kind of degradation. Private sector vehicles will have different one. So again, with fast charging, if you have liquid cooling and some of that, it can, I don't think you will get that much of degradation, and that solves for your timing anxiety problem. That will it be, will I get 15 minutes, 50 kilometer, 100 kilometer? Many companies have shown that, right? Coming to your cost and I think life cycle, right? I think they're related, I think, again, with battery packs improving and your battery lasting more than, I think, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. I think some of that additional cost that you're paying will ease out over a period of time. So, so Euler is like sort of more, I think, tilted, but I think, like I said, India is a country of like, plenty. Plus you have different use cases: private, commercial, car, two-wheelers, three-wheeler. Within that, passenger, cargo, passenger three-wheeler might have more range. So different segments, right? And also the risk-taking ability or comfort of the customer who is purchasing the vehicle. Somebody wants to, let's just say, purchase a three-wheeler, drive around, might want to own the battery pack. He feels like much more comfortable, that he does not want to go swap in the middle of a route when he has to deliver some order. So different use case scenarios. So I think it both will exist. We are tilted more toward charging, and
Yeah, great point. In fact, I've learned something from you, that the battery question should be seen from these 4 words: life, range, time, and cost. And on a related note, I remembered that a smart city webinar which we were doing, where a young gentleman like you told us that the smart city piece should be seen from work, live, learn, play, supply, and care. So that's a great learning. Thank you very much. Coming to, before I come to Anmol, let me just alert Nishant that, Nishant, there are a lot of questions coming on electrolyzers. So I will be asking you about electrolyzers and batteries and what are the similarities in terms of capital, human, and technological synergies which are there in the development of both these products. Coming to Anmol. Anmol, tell us, how do you feel? What is your vision that the charging infrastructure, how it should evolve?
Sure, sir. So first of all, sir, I want to mention about the charge anxiety. With each passing day, the number of the battery density is getting better. Today, we have cars which are doing four-wheel cars, mid-size sedan cars, which can do easily 220 kilometers. I'm not talking of the higher end Konas and the MGs. I'm talking about the Veritos and the Tigors. They can do about 220 kilometers on a single charge. So essentially, they are sufficing for the use case. But I think we need to understand from Chetan sir of how we can also implement swap for four-wheel. In all my conversation with OEMs, at least they are not kind of happy to provide a four-wheel on a four-wheel with a swapping facility. I am definitely sure four-wheel with a swapping facility will make our unit economics go even much better from a time availability, because we waste 2 hours charging our cars. So if Pavan sir, you would allow, we should get some thought from Chetan sir on how four wheels can also get into swapping, because that's not really happening. Now, our vision of at BluSmart, our vision of how we see charging infra getting built is that, again, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. All electric fuels, liquid fuels will get replaced by electric fuels. Just like how 50 years back, 40 years back, Indian Oil, Hindustan Petroleum, all these large oil marketing companies got created. Similarly, we will see a lot of charging infra swapping companies get created in the current form, because all liquid fuels will transform to electric fuels. And it's a very, very big opportunity. At least at BluSmart, we are not waiting for the chicken and egg problem, and we are saying that we are going ahead and building a huge amount of charging infra. I can tell you that before the end of the year, we will have, at least in the city of Gurgaon, a fast charging station in every 2 square kilometers. So that's going to be, and then we open it up to the citizens of Gurgaon to say, now your chicken and egg problem is solved. Now go and buy the electric cars that you always wanted to buy. So we believe that somebody has to take that plunge, and we are there to take that plunge to create that infra, of course, along with all our ecosystem partners. Yes, so that's our kind of thought. In terms of setting up of the charging infra, we see 3 things which need to be there. We want to set up charging infra in areas of high ride density. So we continuously map areas of high ride density because our drivers would be mostly there. So we want to reduce their dry run. The second most important point is to get the load. Now, unlike we need some huge quantities of load. For example, if I have to charge 100 cars in parallel, it requires a megawatt of load. A megawatt of a load is not less. It is almost like a mall or a 5-star hotel, the amount of load that we are seeing. We today have hubs which charge 150 cars in parallel. So we need some large loads at areas of high ride density. So, you tell me, Anmol, we need, my ideal place in Gurgaon, for example, is Cyber City. Now, can I get a 2 megawatt load with a 200 parking slot availability at Cyber City? That is not possible. So we are always on the lookout for trade-offs between land and load, and to say that, what will be the best and ideal positions to set this up. And I think that's just like how McDonald's would say that their business is not selling burgers, but real estate. For charging stations also, it is going to be the real estate, which is going to be the key thing, where your charging station is located and at how important point your charging station is located. That will determine how much its utilization comes in, and that will determine whether people are using your charging infra or not. So I think with that kind of vision and mission, we are building out charging infra, at least right now for the city of Gurgaon, very shortly for Delhi, and then India.
Oh, great. Super points. In fact, I would like to complement a point where you said that the oil supply companies will be replaced by charging companies. I do feel that the change will be very far reaching, but maybe it will not obliterate all that was there in the past. Just as when internet came, we felt that now the malls will not operate. Everything will happen, selling will happen on the net, and the education will also happen on the net. However, malls also survived till COVID came, and schools also survived. At the same time, whatever change which you are talking about was also far-reaching. There was a lot of education on the net, and there was a lot of selling on the net. Having said that, I would now like to agree and endorse the points which you made. And I was reminded of the bulb. When the bulb was invented by Edison, one of the biggest scientists at that time, Morton, said that this is just a toy, because all this infrastructure of power generation, bringing the power to the city, delivering it to every home is impossible. And the entire populace agreed with whatever Morton was saying. But Edison invested in all that, as you are doing, Anmol, and created Edison Electric Company, which is now the General Electric Company. And then electricity spread everywhere. Even in the ICE engine variety, when the automobile, oil-based automobile won, there were no petrol pumps. And there were no roads also, because it was only the buggy which was driving. So where you were getting the petrol from? Petrol was procured from chemist shops in small pints. And all those pints were then together poured into the fuel tank. But because the product was so strong, as is the electric vehicle, I fully endorse, and I'll be happy that if I see all that happening. Also, your Indian oil in electric sector coming up. That's a great wish to have. And with the people who are like you, who are catalyzing it also, putting their money where their mouth is, it should happen. Coming to Chetan to finish this point, and then go to the Nishant, Arya to finish this round, and then coming to Mr. Anil Srivastava, who has once again joined us to ask about the geopolitics of the supply chains as they are changing. Chetan, the question which Anmol asked was, what is the chance of the car operators, the four-wheelers, accepting the swapping piece? And then I come to electrolyzers and battery to you, Nishant. Chetan.
Sure. Anmol, there is no technology issue. We today do it for buses. We swap a 650 kilogram battery pack robotically in under 3 minutes. And we run these for 250 kilometers a day, right? In China, you've got fleets of 20,000, 15,000 taxis running with swappable batteries. So it's not at all a technology issue. I think the challenge there is you need a certain amount of volume and a commitment from customers. So unlike a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler or a bus, the integration of battery packs is fairly straightforward. In two-wheelers, you can put it under the seat. In three-wheelers, it's nice in the back on the seat. And most buses, either you have a rear engine or the space under the rear seat fits it correctly. But in a car, because real estate is in demand, the gasoline tank or the space is very different. And so therefore, to keep a commonized approach and integrated approach requires a little bit more engineering effort, which means there needs to be a commitment. So if tomorrow, I'm sure you come and say, listen, we want to put 10,000 vehicles out there, I'll be happy to work with you and any of the OEMs to give you that solution. And we do believe it makes a lot of sense, right? Pavan, to your point on oil companies and stuff, I think that's a very important aspect. It's about, in the new ecosystem, everyone being part of it, right? If you don't do that, you're going to have challenges. And so in our model of looking at it today, we have teamed up with Indian Oil Company. We've got already 10, 15 stations running. We'll be having 25 stations up and running. And they have over 330,000 across the country. So the idea would be accessibility to customers would be very high on this front. And I think the other part is even, OEM dealers have these stations and they can use it, which means you have to think of a dealer and what will happen to him 5 years down the line. If you tell him that he's going to have no maintenance and no money to be made, what does he do? But if you bring him in part of the energy ecosystem so he can make some money on a different form on this area, you take everyone along. So we have to be careful, and in this new change, that how do we actually also take the people who are currently part of it in a way that they create new models and revenue streams as we expand this network.
Excellent points and excellent exchange of information. Coming to Nishant. Nishant, there are a lot of questions coming asking about hydrogen cells and electrolyzer technology. So can you just explain briefly to all of us as to where do these things fit in the electric vehicle roadmap. Is it the heavy commercial vehicle and buses where these hydrogen cells, etc., will go? First, explain us the difference, mark the synergies, and then tell us use case. Nishant.
Yeah, Pavan. So I think, see, the first motive for us at JBM as a company is that we are focused on zero emission technologies. Today, we see electric as the most promising zero emission technology. And that's why we are committed to the ecosystem. When you talk about the electrolyzer, there are multiple ways to split hydrogen and oxygen, multiple ways to really use hydrogen with the fuel cell technology, what Toyota and other great companies across the world have been doing, whether used for passenger vehicles, we use for commercial vehicles in any way. The challenge in a country like India is the logistics of hydrogen, the storage of hydrogen today, and how the hydrogen vehicle really does not become a kind of an explosive in a vehicle, and how do you maintain the safety parameters given the road conditions, given the driving patterns, given the kind of traffic conditions we have in our country. So I feel the technology will definitely take some time to mature. And in future, as we were discussing earlier, and I agree to that point, like ICE and electric will coexist. So there'll be multiple zero emission technologies which will coexist, and few of them will get hybridized, where we talk about electric and fuel cell coming together in the future to enhance the range of the vehicles and to also ensure the reliability and the safety factor of the vehicles, and also reduce the weight. I think those will be certain critical parameters we'll address, and the operating cost also will go down substantially and simplify the whole architecture. Like moving from ICE to electric, we reduce from 1800 moving parts to 18 moving parts, more or less in electric bus. In case of hydrogen, that will get further optimized, and we'll be able to see how the maintenance cost of the vehicle and other cost structures of the vehicle get addressed. But eventually, we as a company always try and see how do we talk about a commitment, a target which we bring in place. So like we've already made a commitment of 1 billion zero emission kilometers in the next couple of years, 1 billion kgs of CO2 which we want to reduce, where we will be using all these different technologies to work and really understand that not only in India, but how one can position oneself as a global player, how we are working with different players like Daimler, BMWs of the world in Germany in our plants there, or other parts in South Africa or in North America or in China or other parts of Europe. So we are working on a global scale with our customers, with our partners and the ecosystem players on such technologies here. The idea is, how are we able to see we have a clear technology roadmap? I think with FAME, it has given us basic roadmap for the first 3 years until 2022. But definitely as the time goes by, the technology evolution will be very fast. And there, companies which are able to come up to a certain level with the TCO, I think how CNG creeped in the year 2000, it has been able to have the expanse, and now the government is setting up 10,000 stations. Something similar could happen with hydrogen probably after 6 to 7 years. I think middle of the next decade, such kind of things should start happening. By then the technology would become mature and stabilized, and then that level of hybridization would happen, like how we are seeing in case of LNG as well. Like in Europe and other countries, it's being used for long haulage for commercial vehicles. Similarly, in India, the government is talking about that. In case of commercial vehicles or buses, when it started with CNG, it was a big challenge. Everyone used to see that how it will be explosive, how we will have the safety of people. But those, we were able to overcome those hassles. And as people are ready for the change, the operating models which they have, that they would refuel in, let's say, 3 years, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, depending on the average. Today, an average user uses for about 50 kilometers a day. How we are able to link the operating cycle with the technology, because at the end of it, what is important is how technology is driving value. Because if technology is not driving value, you cannot knock off, let's say, about 350,000 liters of diesel and 1,000 tons of CO2 from one electric bus in its lifespan. So I think that's very, very important, which differentiates one technology from the other.
Yeah, very well spoken. You started with zero emission technology and nearly ended with that. And I think that is a very good way to define the market. Because when we define it through narrow technologies like electric vehicles or hybrids, etc., then we are creating a space for strife and maybe a competition which will be abrasive. But when we define it as zero emission or low emission technologies, low emission vehicles, then there is space for electric battery operated vehicles, hydrogen vehicles. There are the hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and so on. This allows also the other players to come in. And secondly, inclusive innovation is something which we are very strong advocates of. As you saw in the case of in the US, when the CFCs were to be replaced, they were those companies which were manufacturing chlorofluorocarbons were companies like DuPont, etc. So their replacements were found. They were asked to find the replacements for them, and they were given special grants to find the replacements. So this is inclusive innovation in which, and you have also, by defining this market as zero emission market, tried to make it more inclusive. Great point. Coming to Anil Srivastava sahab. Anil ji, the point which I'd like to ask you is that in the geopolitical scenario, how do you think that the supply chains of electric vehicles would change? And how should we adapt as a country and as an industry? My first question to you is that. Anilji.
Well, I don't know whether this point has already been discussed.
No, it has not been. We were waiting for you.
And I'm really sorry for this, but sometimes it happens with us that we are not able to keep promise the timings. Yeah, but this is a critical juncture, and as we know, the Prime Minister has given the clarion call for Atmanirbhar Bharat, and he also spoke today about the ease of doing business and the way the government is trying to move forward in that. Coupled with that is the entire perspective on globalization, which to our understanding is going to be re-looked into by most of the countries. Now, yes, the globalization was moving on, and there was cost minimization and all those issues were there. But in the change perspective, as we come over the COVID in a post-COVID scenario, the industry has to look into it, that how do they maintain their supply chains, and in what how they really want to be dependent upon. That is very critical in would be in the post-COVID scenario. So as we look at it, the relationships will change, and more with the one country, that is the China, because of the other related issues. Those situations are going to be re-looked into, and then the industry has to be prepared for it. Now, as far as electric vehicles are concerned, there is a lot of dependence on the countries, and particularly on China, as we know about it, the manufacturing and the kind of components which are being imported. So there, the industry has to find out as to where their supply chains are. But along with that, let me tell you, this is a, I mean, I used to talk about the tipping points. Now the tipping point, or exactly the point at which the threshold level for the electric vehicle is about to reach its reaching. Most of the people do talk about the four-wheelers, or the Nishant was talking about the buses, and I also heard part of what Chetan was mentioning. So this is a critical time when a very important decision has been taken yesterday about separating the cost of battery and the cost of the vehicle. Now, there again, it gives a clear intent of the government, although this is one of the ministries which has issued only a guidelines or a directive, but then it also reflects as to what direction the government is looking at. Cell manufacturing of the cell, of course, We need technology from abroad or from the other countries. We need to set up things. A lot of investments are needed for the battery cell manufacturing. But then by separating the other part of it, yes, of course, there are many issues regarding the motor, electric motor and the components, the powertrain, and other issues of the motor. But then it gives us an opportunity where the upfront cost of an electric vehicle would be lower than the upfront cost of an internal combustion vehicle. And particularly in the two-wheeler, the three-wheeler, there is no doubt about it. Yes, the government is focusing on the two-wheelers, three-wheelers and the public transport for the simple reason their contribution to the pollution in the environment and the size of usage. We make more than 80% of those vehicles and they have a large user base. So that is what the focus is, and we have not been focusing on the four-wheeler, individual user four-wheeler vehicles. So now the entire thing, the total picture has to be taken into account by the industry and the stakeholders, those who are in this area, as to how do they move forward. There's we have another fact which I will tell you. We have about more startups in the EV segment than even in China. We have, yes, not many unicorn companies, only a few unicorn companies, particularly the Ola and all. But then look at the number of startups. We are going to have more than 1,000 four-wheeler electric car models by the year 2025. Now, these are the staggering figures which only indicate as to in what direction the wind is blowing. So in that thing also, when so many startups are starting and a lot of work is going on, even not only on the battery cell chemistries and the alternate sources, but rather a lot of work is going on in having even the magnet which is needed for the systems, how to test it and how to have it. The Department of Science and Technology is working on it. We have also been working on the Indian charging standards. Now we want to have a localization of the local charging protocol for the charging standard for the Indian charging stations, and I'm very sure that we have been talking about for more than 2 years. We may succeed in that as well. The charging infrastructure is also that we have already approved more than 1,000, about 12 to 1,300 charging stations to be set up by different public sector undertakings of the country, and it is going to be more than 2,500 charging stations to be set up on highways and in the cities. So things are moving really very fast as far as two-wheeler, three-wheeler adoption is concerned. Charging stations or the fast charging does not really matter. But then again, we are committed and we are moving forward in that direction. There are 10 cities in India where the leasing or the battery swapping model is being used, and Chetan is right here, and I think he is operating. He's already started operations in more than 6 to 8 cities in the country. So then overall picture needs to be looked into. What are going to be our relations or the global relationships between the country? India is poised to be the leading country in the global economy. Of course, in terms of the sheer population or the landmass, we are big, but then again, we are going to be very critically contributing to the global economic activities, and there we cannot overlook the way now the globalization is going to be defined and the priorities the countries are going to look at it. Even the kind of review on the FDIs is going to take place. India, yes, of course, we have not yet very seriously looked into it, but then some of the countries, and particularly the European countries, have very seriously looked into what kind of foreign investment is coming into their countries, who are the companies which are going to take over their companies, or whatever is happening. So this is all very complicated and interrelated issues which need to be looked into. So Pavan, this is what probably in brief would be my call to the industry and the stakeholders.
Excellent point, very well made. And the fact that we have more startups than China in our sector, it makes us doubly more responsible, because this change or the bottleneck, if it will come because of geoeconomics, we have to be very aware of the geoeconomic interface. As you said, the global relationships are going to change. That means offshoring will not be randomly happening. it will now be more friend-shoring perhaps, where countries which are friends of each other, which have a similar political dispensation, a history of peace, might decide to trade with each other. So we will have to keep our eyes very well locked on as to how globalization will change. Maybe it will turn into smart globalization, where there will be a thin layer of globalization to ensure that the supply chains for critical components do not get stopped. But there will be a lot of space for localization, so that neither the economics nor our politics shrinks, and we still have a supply chain which is running. I would like to ask Siddharth to take out the Berkeley report. They have done a very good report on sustainable battery supply chain, and I would like to just show you one slide from there. So if you will all see this slide, what does the EV battery supply chain look like today? So there are, of course, the mining which is happening. Then there are other minerals other than cobalt and lithium which are required. Some of them are rare earths, and they are, of course, not plentiful, nor are they widely distributed. Not only are they governed by sovereignty issues, but also even if they are in a particular country, those mines may be owned by another country. And there are other issues also which make the supply sometimes suspect. This might be regarding safety or their pollution, or even social unrest surrounded around how the minerals are mined. But the bottlenecks are not so much in the mineral space. The bottlenecks are more in the refining space. And of course, China is one of the big refiners. The opportunities may be in finding alternatives, as people are trying to and already getting. For example, earlier for battery technology, neodymium, which is a rare earth which was very much required. Today, it is getting replaced by iron and copper. Earlier for photovoltaic cell, which is required for solar energy generation, the indium and gallium were required, which are now being replaced by silicon. So this kind of basic research, if the government will also help sponsor, maybe let the scientists drive it, both from the public and the private sector, but the sponsorship, if it can come from there, that will be great. And then the second piece is the cathode manufacturing and cell manufacturing. Pack manufacturing is not a problem. And then, of course, recycling, as Nishant also mentioned. These are the points which we will need to see. So this is what I would like to say right now. There is a lot to be said on the energy security piece also. Earlier, we felt that energy is captured by some countries, whether it is US controlling the Saudi Arabian side as a protectorate, or it is China going to Iran, Sudan, and Nigeria, or it is Russia controlling its states. But now, because of these minerals coming into the game, these minerals also we'll have to see what alternatives we can find, and what, till we find those alternatives, how can we make sure that the supply keeps coming, because this is so that this doesn't become a bottleneck. I will leave it here and request you to one of those to join our energy webinars also, where we'll talk more deeply about this, and take it to the panelists, back to the panelists, to what are the points which you would like to say for on the technology piece, on the supply chain piece, so that Mr. Anil Srivastava can also hear those points and maybe incorporate in his policy if he finds them equitable and fair going forward. Let me start with
just one point, Pavan, I would like to add. The Department of Science and Technology is coming forward with a few proposals for the battery research, and there they are going to invite the industry, and they have also come out with a very specific plan as to what should be the contribution of the industry, what the government is going to contribute, and what kind of research is going to take place. And this is one of the latest things which are happening in the Department of Science and Technology, and they are going to announce it very shortly in the area of the battery technology.
So great. Thank you very much, Srivastava sir. So coming to Chetan, let me come to Chetan and ask him, Chetan, what do you think should be the way forward in this area from the government, so that any mistakes which are made of the past can be corrected? Every government which is enthusiastic and really forward-looking creates certain mistakes, and that action is very important, because hurdles should not be the reason why we stop progress, but we should try to land like that very skilled diver who makes a mistake sometimes while taking off from the diving board, but still corrects himself mid-air to land on the surface of the water without a splash. So how can the government land on the surface of the water without a splash, learning from our earlier successes and lessons? Chetan.
Thanks so much, Pavan. I think the first area is the vision from the government, both on mobility and energy. Electric mobility energy is very audacious, and I think this is really good. We've started off on a very good platform. The couple of things I would think are very important to the government is when a technology is changing rapidly, is that the policy should be technology agnostic, right? And this is critical, because what you don't know is what's going to succeed. And you don't want to make up preconceived notions on this area, right? So a good example today is, you have a FAME policy. It has clarity around subsidies for fixed batteries, but doesn't have for swap batteries, right? Now, you may have a customer who flash charges, swaps, fixed charges, leases out batteries. Let them all coexist. But if there's a benefit being given by the government, it should be given equally, and not just say we're going to give it to one technology and not the other, right? And so I think this needs to be fixed. The vision is correct, but all policies should be technology agnostic. Let the market take decisions, and after that, let them go through. Now, yesterday's announcement, for example, was a very positive aspect. But the challenge for us is that there are different stakeholders in the government too, right? And there are different departments. And when electric vehicles come in, it's actually integration of many areas. And I think here NITI Aayog has been playing a great role in trying to bring everyone together. But it's still a challenging front. There is road transport, there is science and technology, there's going to be heavy industries, there's environment, there's renewable energy coming in, and there's power ministry. How do you start to integrate all of this correctly on this front? So in many ways, we need that part of the longer term policy, right? How do you integrate renewable energy with mobility? We have the opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years to power all of our surface transportation in India using renewable energy. But they are not linking the two policies together, right? That linked with storage policy to come in. This allows a much more holistic approach. Now, there are pieces of the puzzle being put in, but I think we've got to connect the dots to give a larger play around this vision to make this area. And I think the third part is going to be around a gap between that vision and the actual implementation, right? So today, there are so many hurdles for someone who actually wants to do it, right? Take, for instance, you want to get power connections today, and Anmol briefly talked about it, right? The cost of transformers, each state is very different. The permissions you need to get it on this area is tremendous. Now, if you want the private sector to say in the next 3 years, put up 100,000 stations across the country, there should be a very simple way where in a week we can put up a station or a swapping station or a charging station, and their policies across this. But this is not just a central level, it's at a state level and a city level. How do we get alignment on these areas, right? At the central level, there are great policies around this area, and some cities still don't allow you to register electric vehicles, right? So here are people struggling, some of the OEMs are struggling to get permits. And while at the top, at the central level, we're saying it's permit free. So the vision is great in the country, and I think it's really good. It's about us, dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making it operational on the current policies that we have, and keeping it technology agnostic, and at a future level, integrating energy and mobility into one.
That was a very constructive comment, and I fully agree with you, Chetan, that NITI Aayog is trying to do a very stellar job Having said that, I would like to underline the points which you have made, that technology is changing very fast. So policy should be technology agnostic. Integration not only of departments, but also of other technological forces which are emerging, which are changing the paradigm. Like, for example, you spoke about renewable energy. And third is, you have said about ease of doing business. It is really very, very difficult many a time to even, actually the law does not enable us to even sell power or to consume power commercially. There are many state laws which have also to be remedied. Great points you've made. I would like to now come to you all one by one as to what are your policy or your recommendations on policy or regulations. And please feel free to make your point just as Chetan did. Nishant.
See, I think this is a very relevant point because first thing is that I think which is important from the government angle is how to create an enabling environment and how to bring in awareness. I think that has happened very well, and the example of ESL, how it started and motivating people, and how government tried to lead from the front to showcase how they can start using electric vehicles. And as we understand, as I shared in the beginning also, renewable energy generation to consumption, as our country is going to 800 gigawatt in the next decade, out of which 50% will be renewable, and majority of it will come from solar, I think would be a great contribution, and that will really establish the ecosystem here. The other point is that definitely we want that the government should create enabling environment for the first few years. We need the government subsidies to be in place until the sector is able to stand on its own feet and it becomes a viable proposition. But afterwards, we really want to see that how the sector grows on its own and comes out of its clutches and is independently working. I think that's the reason. I'll just take example of the automotive industry. Today, the automotive industry is the 50% of the manufacturing GDP of our country. And today it is not depending upon the government regulation other than the CMVR regulations and the emission regulations. Something similar on the electric front is what is important. We definitely, in certain areas, some companies do feel we should standardize, but I do agree with what Mr. Srivastava and NITI Aayog is doing extremely well. If we do standardize, then we do end up missing out on many new technologies and opportunities. Something which happened in solar with photovoltaic and CSP eventually lost out on the race because PV was more cost effective and TCO was positive. And how we can actually enable the use of IoT, artificial intelligence and machine learning, how even I think the IT ministry can be involved here, and the involvement of NITI is very, very essential, how with electronics playing such a huge role, and the government bringing in a focus with PMP and FAME too, I think is fantastic. But what is essential is the government lays out a true roadmap and supports the industry. Industry is investing significantly. When industry went from Euro 4 to Euro 6, which is BS4 to BS6, across the world it needed 10 years to do that. India is the only country to do it in 3 years. We can have a similar aspect in localizing and producing everything locally, but giving technology funds to industry. As Srivastava mentioned, I am also part of the DST panel where we are working on these technologies. But it is very, very important how that collaboration happens and an end-to-end perspective can be brought in and industry can be supported. And as initially in the automotive sector, also government brought in multiple subsidies. There were hubs which were created. I think another thing which would really benefit is if we create some light cities, where those cities are having an end-to-end perspective, maybe in some key cities and key states across the country, and they can become demonstrators and rest of them can copy and paste in other cities, whatever is relevant. So like in China, they did this for Shenzhen. It was the highlight for the whole country, and then everybody just went on with it because they showcased and demonstrated what they actually wanted to deliver. So if we can do that clearly, I think that will help a lot. And across various modes of transportation and creating a balance of energy and transportation. I think the combo of both is very important, in addition to what Chetan talked about, different ministries integrating and working together.
Yeah, very good points. Awareness, you said, is a great job well done on enabling environment, demand side and supply side incentives are being well planned. Again, you have reinforced what Chetan said, that things are changing very fast. Maybe what you have, maybe you're saying, what you're saying in other words is, this is not the new normal. This is the new flux. So please stay technology agnostic in your policies. And you have also pointed out towards the new technologies like blockchain, IoTs, etc., which are also going to, through their interface, change the complexion of this market. Coming to Anmol, Anmol, your final points for Mr. Srivastava as well as our audience, which has stayed back in very large numbers. Sorry, we have a little running out of running over time, but we will close in about 5-7 minutes. Anmol.
So, no, first of all, I'd like to place on record our appreciation for Government of India. I think it's been a fantastic ecosystem that is being created right from the top. And when the top is so involved, I think it just does wonder. So thanks for that. I have just one small request that I would like Srivastava sir to help us with, is homogenization of electricity charging rates across the states. I understand power is a state and a center subject. And there are some, and there is already a guideline from CERC to mention what is the maximum tariff that you can charge for an electric car charging, or or any form of electric to charge. But I think it is not being followed in spirit. So if with his good offices, he can help us in establishing a uniform electricity charging tariff across the states, it will just make our business model more robust. We will have more certainty in our fuel cost, whereas it can be that state A, my fuel cost is 1 rupee a kilometer, and state B, my fuel cost is 2 rupees a kilometer. It does happen with petrol and diesel also, but the difference is not 100%. The difference is 5%, 4%, 10, some 4, 5, 7%, which is acceptable. But today, going from state to state, Delhi is at 4.5, Haryana is not, then maybe Uttar Pradesh is not, and so it is if we can get states to be on a common platform on how much to charge for an electric charging, the electricity tariff, I think that will be a great boost to the sector. I think, and this is the only point that I could think of. Most of the other points are already kind of taken.
Your request has the fragrance of optimism. You're already looking at intercity travel through your cars. That's fantastic. Coming to Saurav, and final words with Dev, and then we will ask Mr. Anil Srivastava also for his final comment. Saurav.
Thank you. So I would want to sort of agree with everyone over here that I think this government has been doing a lot in terms of the EV policies. Certainly there has been an upward tick in terms of there has been ups and downs, but I think from a startup, we are a very small startup, but still I believe that it has been a positive trend. I think given that we are in a light commercial segment and Euler today is operating roughly around 200 three-wheelers on the cargo vehicles on the road, I'll tell you one or two issues, or I think wish list that if can be added that can help. One was and which we did address in the webinar today, was the lending issue, right? So if the EVs can be pushed as a priority sector from a lending perspective, I already know that there is something, there are some for cars, but for a three-wheelers and cargo or passenger vehicle, most of these fleet owners or entrepreneur driver would give 20,000-30,000 in down payment and would lease the vehicle. So if there is some push from government on that side, I think that will really help. The other thing was more around obviously there are a lot of incentives from a financial perspective, and then there are some incentives like no permit and no timing restrictions and some of that. But I think, and this is more from an execution perspective, that we have faced on ground, sometimes let's just say your traffic police or the police, they do not actually, they are not so aware of these policies, especially whenever there are fresh or there are changes. I understand that India is India is a lot of there is center, state, all these different departments, and sometimes information dissemination takes time. But when fleet owners are actually running, some of the times I've seen it's actually those the ability to run the vehicle day, night, and without restriction. Those are sometimes better benefits in their mind than anything else. And I think that allows us businesses like e-commerce to run 3 shifts in a day and help get better optimization, even if the upfront cost is a bit higher. So I think those were the 2 things that I wanted to add. But having said that, I mean, the policies and the direction is already very good. And I'm very confident that India will emerge as one of the, if not the best, but the global. So I mean, India will have sets of global competitors that can dominate the world in the EV segment. And it's not that just the EV companies from West will come and sort of rule the Indian roads. I think that's our belief there.
Very good recommendations, very fluidly and graciously made. And do not be apologetic about being a small startup. The right up to the top, from Mr. Anil Srivastava onwards, even our Honorable Prime Minister, who we had a long interaction with recently, is very concerned about the small sector, the smallest sector, because he feels that is where the real initiative, etc., is going to come from. And in our sector only, or a related sector, the aeroplane was not discovered by the aeronautics people. It was discovered by 2 bicycle manufacturers who were the Wright brothers. And even in our sector, EV sector, it was not the Toyota but Tesla which discovered your vehicle. So we have a lot of hopes on you, and we are sure through your charm and grace you will move forward. The final points to Mr. Anil Srivastava as well as to the audience.
Yeah, I think most of the points have been covered. I would just like to summarize that the government has been very consistent, in my view, on the environment as well as the emission controls we have seen. And this is a great push towards the EV. EV will be a significant, part of the whole automobile chain. So on the fiscal side, also there have been a lot of incentive like subsidies and all. On the monetary side, as Saurav mentioned, I think some sort of direction could be given on the lending and the financing side, so that there is an ease of selling from the OEM side. I just want to mention one more point here, that I think there is a great chance, and Mr. Srivastava mentioned it briefly, that India becoming a hub for the components export as well on the EV ecosystem. And we are getting, as a company, we have started not very long ago, but we are getting a lot of traction, and there is a clear shift from many companies from China towards India post-COVID and all that, and they want to source parts from India. So I do see that there is a huge opportunity for India to become a significant player in the eco parts, whether it is motor or controller or electronics, where we have a very big edge, being an IT superpower, and also batteries as giga plants come in and all that. So I do see that India will play a major role, or rather has a very unique opportunity to become a part of this whole global industry, which is today estimated about $500 billion. So I do see that government would most likely come up with some policy. There is always, the Honorable Minister recently talked about India becoming a big hub. So something in that direction could really facilitate this. And other than that, I think the intent is right. The direction is there. Of course, India being a large, federal state, the state and the central policies sometimes work in tandem and all that. So at the state level, I think more and more awareness has to come. And going forward, I do see this evolving very fast with the direction from the center. And I see NITI Aayog playing an anchor role in this. So that's all my views are.
Great. Coming to you, Anilji, what would be your response or final comments before I close the session?
So I must compliment you for an interesting discussion for more than 90 minutes. And one thing is very clear to whatever time I could participate in this, the mood is upbeat. Number one. Secondly, the points which have been raised during this concluding remarks, they're all on our radar, like how to integrate the renewable energy aspirations into the mobility, or whether it is the uniformity of the power tariff throughout the states, and also what Saurav said about the lending issues or the priority lending. All these things are on our radar, but one cannot ignore the federal structure that we have, the kind of governance issues which are there in India, and how much efforts does it need and Chetan did mention it, that he appreciated the kind of coordination and the integration that we are trying to do from the NITI Aayog with various departments of the Government of India and the state governments. So industry does appreciate. I remember 2 years back when we started discussing and started working on these issues. And in one of the meetings, maybe about a year or year and a half back, somebody mentioned that the government is moving faster than what the industry can move. And I feel even today I can take claim, or I can take credit of saying that we are moving in helping the ecosystem and or taking the progressive steps, proactive steps in such a way that we are ahead, and we are urging upon the industry to come forward, to move forward and take India to a pole position or the leadership role in the electric vehicle segment. Not much to add besides this, because I mean, we are very active in NITI Aayog, and my team is very active. We just monitor day-to-day developments and day-to-day progress which is happening, that how many cases have been financed through the FAME. They have a live real-time portal. Similarly, is there any issues with the startups, or are there any issues with the ARAI for the homologation or certification? All these things are very, very deeply and very seriously looked into by us, and we are aware of most of it, and the industry also knows that the way we are functioning and performing, and that is the reason that no other new area of industry or the new areas of growth have caught up with so much of the attention and so much of the public interest but the electric vehicles. So we have been able to put electric vehicles at the center stage, and the entire country is talking about it, and things are moving very well. So it's not that I just want to boast or something, but these are the realities, and I'm very sure that in times to come, we would be moving faster. And yes, we also take into account as and when the hiccups do arise. But along with that, one cannot ignore the federal structure and the issues which are there with the government of state government and the government of India. Thank you, Pavan, and I wish you all the best, and I wish all the best to all the stakeholders, and I'm very sure that India would be moving forward, even in the four-wheeler passenger vehicle segment also, to which we are not focusing for obvious reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anilji. Really appreciate your presence and your comments. I would just like to summarize what we discussed today. We covered a wide variety of topic and went deep into it. That was commercial vehicles. Will they spark the EV revolution? All of you felt yes, they would. And then we go deep dived into the technology, financing, infrastructure, and policy piece. And finally, you all requested for technologically agnostic policy, integration of various departments, and the renewable energy piece, ease of doing business, as well as making sure that the federal obstacles which are there are also removed. So great session. Thank you very much. More than hundred of you are still there. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. It encourages us to provide you high quality content and dialogue. I will now pass it on to Siddharth to close the session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sirs. Our leaders and I have taken home so many nuggets from today's conversation. I'm still receiving positive messages from our leaders in the audience on LinkedIn, on my WhatsApp. Everybody's been thrilled from today's conversation. And thank you to our attendees for staying in such large numbers, even for almost 2 whole hours. I think this has been our longest session and most engaging session so far. Among our core sectors, EV is the most exciting space for me and the Blue Circle team. We look forward to these sessions specifically and continue to do our bit in bringing the EV family even closer. So also, while all the generic questions have been covered and we've tried to go as deep as we can, there are several questions which we have received. Like, for example, we've received a question on sharing the powertrain components localization strategy roadmap, which require a much longer and deeper dive. So we have the finest pool of EV experts from all over the world, and we can arrange such a dialogue at mutual convenience between the experts and the leaders in the audience. And you'll be happy to know, to help the ecosystem further and bring the family even closer, we are coming out with the LinkedIn for Leaders application very soon, a membership to which will give you automated access to such value-added offerings to experts, to the ecosystem as a whole, through discussions and conversations like this. We will reach out to you and also welcome you to reach out to us. The 4 sectors we focus are e-mobility, energy, healthcare, real estate, and construction. This will be a never-before opportunity for both experts and leaders who have the quest to learn and share and also engage. So thank you very much, sirs, once again, and thank you to the audience. Looking forward to such sessions. Thank you.
And thank you, panelists also.
Thank you very much. Thank you.